This is Stacy again with RE Titans, and on the line with me is Kelly Tony, one of my two partners. Hi, Kelly. How are you?
Good, Stacy. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. So we also have Pat in there. Pat's actually in the chat box. So, glad you guys could join us. We will be talking today as part of our Fix and Flip Academy training series about understanding real estate investor formulas. So, with no further ado, we'll just dive right here into it. And you guys that have been on before, I know you've seen this. For you guys that haven't, this is your first time. Just a little disclaimer there. Understand this is an educational presentation, and there are obviously risks in being an investor. And tonight we are not acting or pretending to act like we're accountants or lawyers or providing licensed real estate services or giving tax, economic, or investment advice, but we will offer opinions from time to time, and you guys are welcome to use those. So what I would like to talk to you about is the Flippers formula. I think most people are aware. Y'all could respond back in the chat box. Maybe someone, what is the Flippers formula? Kelly, you know what the Flippers formula is?
I don't, Stacy. Would you point it out to us?
You don't? I'm glad you're a experienced real estate investor. I think that's what people typically refer to as the Flippers formula. Is that the one you're used to seeing?
That's exactly the one I'm used to seeing. 70% of times of ARV less your repairs.
What is ARV? That's one of them acronyms. What does that stand for?
And that stands for after repair value.
Which I think probably some people would probably relate to as being retail or maybe MLS value that they see on a multiple listing service. So, but I guess for the purposes of the Flippers formula and what people normally look at, that's going to be your ARV or your after repair value times 70% less your rehab or repairs will equal our purchase price, target purchase price. So we're going to start through and do a little example and talk about the Flippers formula. And what I want to do tonight is look at the basis for it. Why do we use this formula? I've seen things out there in the blogosphere and people argue about it and say, well, using a formula is not very beneficial, but there's some validity to it and there's some reason we use it. And so we're going to talk about that. And I said I couldn't be heard, so I turned myself up a little bit. Let's see if we can get this screen on. So we will talk about as we go through this while we use it. I want to go through and start with, we're going to be pretty simple here. We're going to start with that we got a property that the ARV is going to be $100,000. So that means that once we complete the repairs, that this house should be worth $100,000. That's what we should be able to sell it on the market to a retail buyer who's going to get a mortgage and purchase this property from us. So just got to using our formula, that means 70%, pretty easy Aggie math, goes along with my Aggie accounting degree. That would be $70,000. But we know that if we're going to be flipping a house, that normally means that it's going to need some repairs. So for the purposes of our little example there, we're going to say that the house needs $25,000 in repair. Therefore, I think most people, and I know we got a chat box and not live volume, but most people would probably come back and say that we need to purchase this property for $45,000 or less. One of the things to look into is the or less thing. In this case, we're making the assumption that we're going to be buying the property either directly from a seller or a wholesaler, and so therefore our basis or our cost in getting started on this project is $45,000. Kelly, we like to wholesale property sometimes. So if we were negotiating this deal, what do you think? Where we probably need to be at if we're going to be trying to wholesale it?
Well, for a flip, if this was a flip scenario, which we're talking about, then we would have to be less than that 45,000 purchase price. So we would need to be anywhere, we're going to try to target anywhere between $5,000 to $10,000 in a wholesale fee. So if we can get it down to 35,000, that's where we need to be, or maybe even 40. Stacey, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Why, and we'll probably get into this, but why 70%?
Well, we are going to get into that. It's 70%. There's a reason for that because obviously 70,000 in using the basic math to figure out what we're going to purchase it at, you have a spread of 100,000 less 70,000. But if we get a little bit deeper into it, we're going to explain exactly why we want to be at 70%. Especially here in the Houston market. I know there's people that argue about other markets, and we'll get into scenarios that comes about, but we got to have some spread in there if we're going to make money. I mean, we're in business. I think something you pointed out a while ago.
I mean,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
On the surface, it looks like a pretty good deal. I mean, I'm fixing to make $30,000 on this thing, so I'm sitting pretty good.
Well, that's what kind of gets people fooled or confused. I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to point out one more thing. It probably ties into this as well. Is that we see a lot of people out there selling properties, and they'll be selling for over that formula as a wholesaler, and I'm sure they find buyers out there. It's not going to be any buyers that we're working with or any deals we're doing ourselves. But what they'll do is that, well, 30,000, boy, that's a lot of money. What if I just make it, 25,000? Well, that's something we're talking about. Gross profit is very valuable in analyzing a deal, but gross profit isn't what you put in your bank. It's not the check you cash at the end of the day. And so that kind of leads into our last point. We're going to go through this is that net profit, that's the number that we are concerned about. That's the number that's going to really count. Gross profit gets you started, and you certainly want to have a good gross profit number, but net profit is what we're going to be worried about. Is that kind of where you were headed to?
Yeah, exactly. Glad we're going in the same direction.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and start answering that question. So the question is, and like you asked a while ago, why do we use 70%? Why do we not use 80% or 85% on a flip? And that's what people will ask a lot of times. So one of the first reasons, we got components of the formula, and they're going to be meant to cover some things that are not covered in your gross profit. Before I get to those, I know one question that comes up. It's like, well, if gross profit isn't what you're going to make on the deal, why do people use that? Well, there's a variety of reasons. One is that as a wholesaler, and I think this is where it probably comes about, because you'll see wholesale deals advertised with these just really big gross profits, is that a wholesaler doesn't know how you're going to finance your deal. They can't really estimate a lot of times what it's going to take to get your deal done and the time that takes into that. They don't know how you're going to sell it, or you're going to use a realtor or not. So that's some of the things that they don't know, and you can't expect them to know. But a gross profit's a very good starting point. But just remember, it's not what you're putting in your pocket. So one of the components are going to be your closing cost on purchase. So when you close that deal, we're talking about just costs. We're just talking about the cash price to buy the property, the cash price to repair the property, but that doesn't include your closing cost when you purchase the property. And typically, Kelly, what is that? If we're doing a distressed purchase or we're doing a wholesale purchase, you do these quite a bit. What closing costs should we expect to pay?
Percentage-wise, or the actual cost?
Just some of the items. What's some of the items that we should probably be accounting for that's going to be in our closing cost?
The things that you're going to need to account for is, first and foremost, the title policy.
if you're dealing with a distressed seller, you're going to be paying all of their closing costs, which on their side would be their share of escrow fees, deed preparation, things of that nature. And you can also run into having to pay and bring current their taxes for the year, any outstanding HOA liens or other type of liens of that nature that you may need to bring up because the seller you're dealing with may not have the cash to bring to closing, or there may not be any equity in the house for them to bring that money to closing.
Yeah, no, that's correct. That's a good point because, when you go in and they talk about cash deals, when we're advertising to distressed sellers, they expect that that's going to be the net number they get. They're not expecting, like in a traditional retail sale, where they're going to get that number less closing cost and other fees and expenses and stuff like that. So that's why we've got to include it on our side of the deal. So the next component we run into is our cost of capital or financing cost. And, even if you use cash to do a deal, there is a cost to your capital, because if you're tying your capital up in this property and you can be earning some other kind of return, there is a cost. If you're using an HML or a hard money lender, asset-based lender, there's going to be some cost in those. Or if you're using a private party partner, investor lender, there's going to be some cost in those as well. The next thing we have is our carrying cost. While we own that property, we are responsible for the taxes. We are responsible for the insurance. I think I would put it up there when you were with what you said the other day when you were doing the title commitment webinar. Insurance and title insurance, and builder's risk insurance are two things that we just don't we don't mess around with unequivocally. If we're going to take title to a property, the moment we take title to it, we want to have insurance on it. I don't care if it's 5 hours, 5 days, or 50 days. If you've got your money, or you've got your money plus the money that you are, have on a lien, you do not want to lose that property. And there are people who have done. It's interesting. My mentor, gone back and forth with some conversations with he and his wife about doing that. And once you look at the risk, it's not worth not having the insurance. So moving on, we got the maintenance. Believe me, when the grass might be 4 feet tall before you bought it, but once they know that someone owns it, it's going to fix it up. They're going to want that place kept clean and maintained while you're there. You have your utilities. Obviously, when you have your rehab going on, when Pat's in there with his crews, they don't have to be bringing generators in and things of that nature. And just part of getting it done is the utilities, and so you're going to have your utility cost, and then you've got your HOA or your homeowners association dues in the event that you're in a managed subdivision, which is a lot of times the case here in the city of Houston. So let's go on our next. The last thing that we have is we've got our marketing. We're going to have to pay some money for marketing, whether that's taking pictures, advertise or whatever. We've got our time to close, and we've got our closing cost on our sale. And closing cost on our sale, even though it's a retail deal, you turn around, put yourself in the seller's shoes, and we were talking about costs the seller doesn't pay when we're buying from them. Well, now those are costs we will be paying, which most likely will be a title policy again. Those will be a realtor fee. We look at least a minimum 3%, but depending on the investor, you might want a listing agent, and you could end up paying 6%. And then you have your typical closing costs, your fees and expenses and everything else that go along with that. I think we talked about...
When you're talking about marketing time and we're talking about these, something to point out is there's two periods here that we're dealing with. We're dealing with the period that we close on the property up until the point that we rehabbed it, and then we go into our sales mode. And so as part of your 70% formula, you have to look at the time on the market. So if this project is going to be, it's going to take 2 months to repair, and the days on market generally for this particular property may be 90 days. Well, you're talking about a hold time of approximately 5 months to 6 months. So you have to include that. You have to keep that in mind. And going back to the closing costs, that from the buyer side, typically we're paying all of the seller's closing costs. But when we go to sell, and we talked about this before, on a typical retail transaction, you know, it's pretty standard practice for the seller to pay for the title policy, and their share in taxes are prorated, and their half of all the closing costs. So that's why the expenses that you're talking about, you know, we end up getting hit twice. You know, we pay for all those closing costs, you know, fees and taxes and things at the time we purchase it. And then guess what? When we turn around and sell it, we've got to incur those costs once again, in addition to any realtor fees to put it on the retail market, like you said.
No, that's a great point, and I mean, I think we'll get here in just a minute where you'll see that, you know, 30% can get eaten up pretty quick when you start adding all those things. And I think the other is that when we look at a project overall, and I know it's something that, you know, Pat works with them, and you and work with them, and I work with our clients, and when we're advising people is that you know, you don't price this right and you end up extending marketing and you're paying your interest cost and your maintenance and all that stuff above, it can get pretty pricey over a period of time. So with that, let's move on into closing costs on a purchase and kind of talk about, you know, what should we expect there. It'll go to me. So well, let me back up. Did I go? No, I didn't. Closing cost on a purchase. So the first thing, I'm sorry, is we got our title insurance, our title company fees, and those average 2.5% to 3%. So on our $45,000 purchase price, 2.5%, I'm going to use in this deal will be about $1,125. Something that I don't have up here, but I know you went through the other day, is what exactly would that title policy cost? Well, I can tell you in this case that the title policy component of those fees we have in there is $875. The reason is that, or the reason I know that is if you go to the Texas, I think it's the Texas State Board of Insurance, you can look
Right.
up and there's a schedule, and so it tells you what the price will be from 10,000 up to 100,000, and once you hit 100,000, there is a base fee of $875, and then there is a component for everything over 100,000. I think it's 0.00554 or something like that. But it's pretty easy on a $45,000 deal. Excuse me, I was on the opposite end of that. On 45,000, actually, I think the title policy part of that's probably around 475 or 500. I apologize, I was jumping ahead. So we've got above that, we're going to have some attorney fees. Those can run a couple $100. You've got your, you know, $50 here, maybe $150 to transfer from your HOA. So, you know, I went ahead and used the low end, but $1,125 is a pretty good number there. So the next thing we're going to do is go into our financing cost. A little more, few more calculations with that. We're going to assume that this is a hard money deal, which is what a lot of people are using to do that. So most of the time, coincidentally, a lot of times they target a loan to value of 70%. And what that loan to value is that they do a loan to value of how much they would loan you based on the ARV of the property. So in this case, we got ARV of 100. They're going to charge 4 points on the origination, which that is basically fixed fees against the total loan amount. We'll calculate those here in a minute. We got an interest rate. We know the market here in Houston is 13.99 is the going rate for interest amongst the 4 or 5 major players out here. So our loan amount is going to be 70,000. Our origination points are going to be 2,800. Now we're going to calculate what our interest over the life of the loan is going to be. We're going to use the average loan period of 6 months, which is going to be from the time you buy the property until the time you pay off the note when you sell it to a retail buyer. And approximately using that 70% times 13.99 divided by 12 times 6 is about $4,900. Now, how that calculation worked is I took the loan amount, which you get charged your interest on the total loan amount, not your amount you take out at the beginning, but the total amount of money they have set aside for your project. We multiply that times the interest rate, and then we divide it by 12 for 12 months. So what we're doing is figuring out how much interest we're going to be paying per month. And then based on this project we're doing here, we're going to say it's going to take us 6 months from start to close. That's about $4,900 in interest. So our total financing cost for this deal approximately is going to be $7,700.
Stacy, is there a minimum on your the loan period? Is there a minimum period of time that they're going to charge you? So if I just got a hard money loan for 2 months, can I do that?
You know, with some of our partners that we use on our power team, as far as I know, they have no minimums. I know there's a minimum on origination points of $2,500, which I think is about a $60,000 loan. Honestly, as far as some of the other prominent players here in Houston, I'm not aware whether they have a minimum. But that brings up a good point. Most of them run a 6-month loan, but depending on who you use, and it's a good question you need to ask whoever you're borrowing your money from, they have different fees when it comes to extending past that 6 months. I've heard everything from, you know, a quarter point for every 3 months, or a point for every 3 months after that, changes in interest rates. So if you're looking at a bigger project that's going to run you more than 6 months, you definitely want to make sure and talk to your loan officer and find out what is going to be your additional cost if you run over that 6 months. So to answer your question, I haven't heard of minimum, but for the most part, most of them run 6 months on the maximum as the standard loan term on a flipping project.
Let me ask you this. What if I enter into you kind of covered if we go over that 6 month period, you know, what the penalties we could incur. But hey, what happens, you know, Pat is so good at what he does, he gets out there and he knocks this thing out in 2 months, and it's so fantastic of a job, which it always is, that we get this thing sold in 2 days, that the sign goes up in the yard and the buyer closes in 30 days. And so, man, I've just knocked off 3 months of my loan.
And you would not,
go
well,
to the bottom line?
Yeah, that would go to your bottom line. Absolutely. I mean, we're calculating this interest, so I don't have, let me see, I'll just grab a quick calculator here. I can get it to pop up. I think I can.
It's not going to be paid. I guess
No,
the
you would
question
not.
would be, is the hard money lender guaranteed that 6 months?
Oh, no. The hard money lender is only guaranteed the number of months that you have it. So let's just do this real quick. 70,000. Y'all can see the calculator there, I believe. Times 13999, and then we're going to divide that number by 12. And so our interest is approximately $816.83 a month. So in the case of what you were talking about, 816.83 times 3, yeah, you'd save yourself $2,450 if you sell that house quicker. You get your rehab done, like you said. work with your project consultant and move this thing along, do it right, get it sold quickly. That's real money. The bottom line, $2,450. Does that kind of address the question you had?
I did.
Okay, let's go to carrying cost. So our carrying costs, I think one of the first things we talked about was taxes. So in Harris County, the average tax rate is 2.31%. That's something that's pretty easily attainable that you can find out on the internet. Statistics like that are published. I think that makes a good point. There is a lot of information that it can be really self-service. You just have to take a little bit of time to look at it. I mean, Google can be your friend. Obviously, when I got this information, I got it from a reliable source. When you're doing that, you want to check the reliability of where you're looking at it. But in Texas, the average tax rate is 2.31%. So here for our scenario, I'm going to assume that the county has this property probably listed at a value that's higher than what we're paying for it. And that's what the HCAD in this case, in our scenario, was talking about, Harris County Appraisal District. Their job is to go out into the city property, actually the county property, excuse me, and there's one for Fort Bend, Montgomery County. They have some shared services and stuff, but they go out and they assess what they think the market value of a property is, which I hope that we bought ours for less than that. So we're going to take their value, in this case, make an assumption that they valued it a little bit higher than what we paid since we had a distressed seller, multiply it times our 0.0231 rate, and that's going to give us a number of $1,270.50 annually. So we're going to assume that that's the total taxes that property would be charged annually. And if you take half of that, it's approximately $635 for our 6-month project. I think using your same question a while ago, though, if we do it for half the time and we get this thing knocked out in 3 months, then we're going to be paying about $317 less, more money to the bottom line. Our next one is our standard builder's risk that we were talking about a while ago. I used a little bit of aggressive rate. I know when I say aggressive, I know a lot of times we've seen, more like $9. And if you get into some multi-property policies, it's even cheaper than this. But 10's pretty conservative. And basically the way insurance is, they charge you per $1,000 worth of value. So in our example here, we're going to be paying $10 per 1,000. And obviously 70 is 70,000 times $10 is 700 annually, and that's going to be $350 for 6 months. Our next calculation is our maintenance for lawn care, trash, and other costs. I'm going to kind of estimate that that's $50 a month. That might be a little bit low depending on what you're doing, or it might be a little bit high, but hopefully you're not using a ton of water, and you got a base price for your city services, and then periodically you're going to have to be maybe getting that cleaned up. Now, on the other hand, I know when we do the rehabs and stuff, we put a number in there as part of our rehab cost to cover dumpsters and cleanups and such, but you're going to at least be spending a little bit of money. Our next one is our utilities. In our scenario, I'm using a estimate of $75 a month for electricity, gas, whatever else we have going on there. So I have an approximate total carrying cost for the life of the project for the 6 months of $1,735. Not quite rounded off, but pretty close. So our last is our marketing and closing. Let me back up. Go ahead.
Before you go on to the next one,
and talking about the annual taxes and using you use the average there, but keep in mind that as you're dialing in and doing and evaluating a deal, first and foremost, go get it under contract. And but as you're evaluating the deal, you can go into the appraisal district and you can pull up the tax, like Harris County lists the exact tax rate for each entity within the jurisdiction. So, and depending on where you are, obviously with certain school districts, that's a big factor, as well as the homeowner, not the homeowners, but if it's in a water district, so there's additional taxes that can be thrown in there, and many times those rates can be as high as 2.6 to 2.8 on the rate. And so the other thing you need to be careful of is I've seen people just go in and look at the owners or the sellers. They've taken a look at their actual tax bill from the county as well as the school district, and they said, okay, my taxes are $3,000. Well, what they're not considering is the fact that there is a homestead exemption on those taxes. And the homestead exemption, depending on the entity, can be anywhere from 20 to 25%. So, that can be another significant factor, because when you buy it, there is no homestead exemption. You're paying the full tax rate, and you need to make sure your calculation is correct.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And that was, like I said, an average county tax rate, and it can move. I'll pull that up. Let's just pull that up real quick. You guys hadn't seen this. This is what we're talking about, hcad.org. And it's pretty simple to do this. You can do it either account number, which most of the time you don't have, but you can do it under address, or you can do it under owner name. And now sometimes what's good is we usually do it under address, but owner name, if you're talking to someone, it doesn't hurt sometimes to go see what else do they own out there. But Kelly, what's the property that we closed today? Do you remember that address? I'll pull it up as an example. You know what it's
3311 Right Way.
Okay, so we put the number in here, we put the address in here. We're going to do a search, and we hit it right on the dot, and so it has our information in here. You notice what Kelly was talking about. Let's see if we have the exemption. If it talks about, we have all our tax rates, and so when we were using that 2.31, it was a cumulative tax rate. Where is? Now I'm trying to remember where it says. It usually has in here where your exemption is.
Usually, if I'm not mistaken, you usually have to go
is.
to the. You may have to go to the actual Humble ISD or the Harris County tax record to look at the bill to see what the. So if you click on Harris County right there, it'll take you to.
I think
and
it
I'm
comes
not
up.
sure why it's not showing an exemption.
Well, in this property, because I thought it did, but it does usually show up under here, our exemption type and value. So it would say that it has a homestead in here. And like I said, you and I would have thought that it had on that property. But it is a good point that you can click on this here, and it'll take you over here, and you can go in and look at property tax search, and then you can do it by account number. And what you can do here is we'll go back up here, and there's the account number. Do a copy, we'll do a paste here, search it, and you notice same address. And so we can pull up that tax bill. And actually, it's interesting, like you said, Kelly, it does show that it had an exemption of taxable value, so that would come into play. But if we notice that it's saying taxable of 115 here, and over here it's got a taxable of 176 and 180. It might. That's a little bit funny that our example isn't like what we usually see, but obviously in this bill it's coming up. But there's our bill right there. And
Yeah.
so you can look at what's going on. You can see past dues and things of that nature.
Yeah, and the point to bring up is always remember that the county taxes are going to be, you're going to have to, if you're going to look at the bill, you're going to have to look at two separate bills. You're going to have to look at the county, and then you're going to have to go to the school district to pull up the school district taxes separately.
Yeah, now the cumulative tax rate that I'm
County
using,
bill,
the cumulative rate I'm using of 2.31 actually is meant to encompass all of those those tax rates right there on average for City of Houston. So I'm sorry, you were about to state.
No, I was going to say that if you're looking at the county tax bill, that incorporates line 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, and 45, and everything below humble ISD. It's your school taxes that you'd have to go to that particular school district to find the bill for those taxes.
Right. No, very good. I'm going to shut this down and go back to where we're at, and then I think the next we're going to talk about is marketing and closing cost. It'll allow me to go to my next slide. There we go. So going back, we're going to start with our ARV, or our sales price, of $100,000. We're going to make an assumption in this case that our realtor commission is 6%. At minimum, we want to have a 3% number in there. I know we talk about that in some of our other training, but we certainly advocate our buyers being represented by a selling agent, which is actually the person that brings them to your property, versus necessitating a listing agent, which is the person that sticks the flag out in your front yard. In the case of what we do and work with our clients, we do what's called a flat fee listing, which still is not no cost. It can cost around $300 to $500 depending on what you want to do. But in any case, you're looking at 3%. But highly recommend that either on both sides, or basically in that on both sides you have a realtor. It's just whether your listing agent is going to be paid to manage the listing, the inquiries and working with the selling agent or not. And until you get kind of a little bit more experience with this, we think you ought to have someone working on both sides as well until you get comfortable working with the selling agents. But then we got a closing cost. We're going to use our 2.5% again of the sales price. Just FYI, average estimating closing cost on retail deals are 8 to 11%. In this case, you can see we're using 8.5%. But if you're out in the field and you don't have time to go through all these detailed calculations, but you want to kind of do a rough cut estimate, 8 to 11% is a pretty good number to just kind of capture everything. So we're going to have a realtor commission of $6,000, obviously using our 6% of $100,000. We're going to have closing costs of $2,500, and so therefore we're going to have total cost on sale of $8,500. So let's kind of see where this brings us to now. I add it all up. So our closing cost on our purchase, we got $1,125. Our financing cost, we have $7,700. Our carrying costs, we got a little over $1,700. And our closing cost on our sale is $8,500. Gives us a total cost of approximately $19,000. Now if we go back to our, so let's remember that. One thing I want you guys to remember, because I don't have it on the slide, but I want to talk about something, and it's something that people, I think, probably complain about more than anything next to realtors, probably realtors and financing cost, which are our two big numbers there, are the things that people probably get the most hung up on when they're looking at doing these deals and where they try to cut corners. So here I'm going to go in there and let's recap our deal. So if you remember before, we had an ARV of $100,000. We had our $70,000 formula. Repairs were $25,000. Our purchase price was $45,000. And so we had our gross profit of $30,000. That big number that always gets everybody excited that that's what they're going to stick in their pocket. Well, we know now that that's not the case, because we have total cost in addition to that of $19,000, which means we have a profit of $11,000. honestly, using 100,000 is more for simple math. We would like to see, and some of these things will fluctuate, that net profit percent's more like around 15%. But on the other hand, I think that, kind of addresses the question, and I know we've talked to people before about why you don't flip a $100,000 house. It's hard to make some money on that. It's hard to make money and make a living off of $11,000 profit like that. But I know when I was in production home building, we sold a lot of $11,000 to make good money, and it was good money, but you can't be just doing them here and there. Before we go to the next thing, I want to bring up a point that you kind of alluded to earlier, intentionally or unintentionally, is the asset-based lenders, the hard money lenders, similar to like our partner on our power team that we use, and that's $7,700. So, Kelly, what have you heard? I think you probably know the answer to this, but if you go out to a private money person, and back up, we're not in the danger zone yet. If you go out to a private money person and you said, hey, I've got this deal, I want you to put the money up for it, and I'll split the profit with you. How much profit are they going to probably want?
Oh, they're going to want 50% of your deal.
50%. That's it. That's what I've heard before. So let me just pull what did I do with my calculator? We'll bring that back up here. I should have had that when we did this before. So we've got $11,000 profit. If I recall, our financing cost was $7,700, right? Because we're going to kick that.
Correct.
We're going to kick that greedy hard money lender out of our deal. They're taking too much of our money, and I'm going to go find me a private money partner, and they're just going to make everything wonderful. Well, so that's great. We're going to make $18,700, and how much you said they were going to take 50% of that? Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Well, we'll multiply this times 50%. Wow. Kind of interesting there. Go ahead.
You mean I gave up more money doing a partnership than I did on a hard money deal?
Well, yeah. I mean, that you got that private money lender in there because that hard money guy was taking $7,700 of your money. So, but it looks like you did. It looks like you gave up $1,650, which I think even brings a bigger point up. When we talked about earlier, let's go back to, so we got $9,350. If we save some money and it's now, we start saving money, and let's just say for whatever reason we figure out a way to save that $2,450 you talked about. But wait a minute, we got a partner in here. We only get $1,125 of it. What did you say the hard money lender, or I guess I answered your question, but if we did this deal quicker and our number, let's just go ahead and do it like this, 11,000 plus, I think it was $2,450. Isn't that how much we were going to save in interest? I'll go ahead and answer. I think I lost you. So now we make $13,450. And that's all money we get to keep in our pocket. It's not money that goes to someone else. And so, that's one of the good points to point out. Hard money is non-recourse. It means you don't have to personally guarantee it, and it does cost money. You're using someone else's money. But it's a lot better scenario, unless you can negotiate a better partnership deal, than to give away half of your profits, because that means that every dollar you make, you're going to be paying a flat cost to your lender, regardless of how you structure that lender relationship. But if you've got a partner in there, and I'm not saying partnerships are bad, because we've done partnership deals bad, but you got to evaluate them on a logical, reasonable basis, not just on an emotional basis because you hate the banks. And I think that's what we run into a lot of people doing. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. I'm actually going solo here for a minute. Kelly will be back with us in a minute, so I might have to talk to myself. We're going to go into the danger zone. This is what I want you to really look at. Let's go back. So we're going to make $11,000. Let's get into the danger zone. So what's one of the first things that'll happen in the danger zone? What if your ARV is off by 5%? Well, if you're off by 5%, that means you're going to sell your house for $5,000 less. So that's a negative $5,000 on your bottom line. So let's look at something else. What if our repairs are off by 5%? Well, if we're off 5% on a $25,000 rehab job, we just knocked $1,250 negative off of our bottom line, off of our profit. Look at something else. Let's see, we go the opposite way and we don't sell the property as quickly as we want to because we priced it too high or we didn't get our work done on time. Let's say it's delayed by 2 months. That's a negative $2,100. Let's add all this up. We add it all up. We just lost $8,350 against our $11,000 profit. So I don't know about you. I think that made me a little aggravated. So if you think about it, when you're talking about this 70%, if we had bought this house for more than 70% and we just had one of those items hit us, I mean, that could knock away all of our profit because obviously you wouldn't be making 11,000, you'd be making less. And any one of those would make it not a really viable deal. So let's talk about some of the factors that we need to consider when using this formula. And especially, you know, should we back off of the formula or should we be less aggressive on the formula and go higher? The first of all is our comps, our comparables with others around us. Are they conservative or aggressive? What are the days on market, which is DOM? What are your cumulative days on market? What are your listings and what are your solds? I think that's something we run into a lot of times with people. You know, if we get into a area of town and we can see a lot of good movement, we see properties are selling for, 30 days, 45 days, something under 60 days. The prices are pretty consistent. That's one thing. But if you get into a area and you don't have a lot of comps and you do see that the ones that are selling are taking a long time to sell, well, I don't think I want to be aggressive on my formula. I might want to back down and only buy that house at 60 or 65%. The same thing for listings and sold. We want to see a pretty good even match there. We don't want to see 20 listings and 3 sold, say in the last 6 months, 12 months, or whatever. That doesn't show a lot of velocity. Volume. We want to see volume and velocity on what we're looking at in our comps. And so it doesn't mean don't do a deal, but when you look at that 70%, if it's not, going very well, then doesn't mean it's not a doable deal, but maybe we need to get that property at 60, 65, maybe even need to get it down to 50 or 55%. Because that affects your carry-in days, that affects your pricing to get your property sold, that affects other things. If on an uptrend market, and this is something we did see when the market was really hot before it started turning in 2015, we could afford to buy properties more in the 75, maybe 80% deal because, here's the thing. If you could finish a deal fast and you could put a stick in the yard and sell it in the same day, well, we don't have all those other factors to worry about, and we can be a little more aggressive. But that's one of the things to look at. The others are your repairs. Who developed your budget? Is it someone that's just trying to get you to sign a contract and get you locked up, or does it allow for contingencies? Does it give you a good look? Because like you said, if we were off our budget just 5% on a small deal like $25,000, that starts being real money, and you end up being off 10 or 15%. That can kill your deal when you're working on tight margins like the 70%. our neighborhood, what are the trends? That kind of goes back to the comps, but you know, are you seeing a lot of rehabs or are you seeing a lot of new builds? You know, if you're in the average of the market, then that's good. That's where we always want to be. We don't want to be we don't want to be the biggest house or the smallest house. We don't want to be the oddball house. We want to be with the trends, whether that's new build versus rehab, rent versus own. That's one thing that I think people really. I know Kelly, you got back on the line, but we really see a lot is that people get a good deal, but it's in a neighborhood that's mainly rental. Well, you're probably not going to be able to rehab that house. So what does that mean? You're going to be selling it for 10% less of what the retail market is.
Yeah, you're right, Stacy. And there's little nuances that as you're comping things like that and taking into consideration. You talk about neighborhood, but you talk about location. You talk about. I know there's houses I've looked at that are on a 4-lane road. It may have a median, but it's a busy road, or it backs up. I've had houses that back up to a big retail center. So you're looking out of your backyard. Well, how much do you begin to discount things like that? Or even the house that we were talking about with Bob earlier, that it's got a master bedroom upstairs. So you have to look at some of those little nuances and things and figure that when they're out of the norm, how's it going to affect your resale value, both monetarily as far as the actual sales price, and how long it may add to your days on market, and how do you discount that further when you are doing your initial comps and things like that to come up with your projected ARV.
Yeah, and so that's when when people talk about not using it, and honestly, what I see out there, or what I hear is that when you hear people slamming the 70% rule, it's usually two kinds of people. Either it's a really experienced person, and I think they're just trying to come up with a deal that they're smarter than everybody else. Or in the same way, it's and they still use it. They just don't want to tell you they're using it. Or it's an inexperienced person, which is even worse because they think they can beat the system. And I hope that going through this, and this is getting into our danger zone and our factors to consider. It's not a perfect science. We don't ever go out there and say exactly, okay, if this thing is, if it's not 70%, if it's 71 or something like that, that we don't do the deal. We kind of start there and say, okay, this is where we know we want to be in the mainstream. Now, what's the things like what you're talking about? What are the things that kind of surround this deal that say, which way do we want to move? And we might not move. I don't think we go in and say, okay, change our number so much on that. Is that, we'll say, okay, what are we going to do if our repairs, or, we want to buy this for a little bit less or something like that. But, it's a good, proven formula that takes into account the fact that, gross profit is not what you put in your bank account. And you need something to cover, excuse me guys, you need something to cover your bases, because even if you get in there and get that thing done quick, there are certain of those costs that you're going to have and you got to account for. And, I think we've talked before just amongst ourselves that, a rule of thumb that we kind of use, even though it doesn't tie exactly to this, is that, whatever gross profit is, we know that net profit's going to be half of it. So that's when someone that's new and comes and says, hey, I found this property and I can make $25,000 on it, because that's what the wholesaler told me. Well, we immediately know that it's going to be at least 12.5 or probably less, because, you're not going to put that in your pocket. And then you start looking at, it's a $60,000 rehab that could take you 8 months. Well, I don't know if that's worth making $12,500 unless you're in this business doing multiples. So anything you want to add? Obviously, I kind of showed the next deal. We're going to go into Q&A and see what comes up on either chat or people that want to jump in and ask questions. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered all the points, and when we do talk about percentages and our target profit percentage, you know, you hit on the 15%. As you can see, if you're doing lower end type homes, it's, as you pointed out earlier, that it's not nearly as profitable, but it can be. That's when your percentages want to jump up, that you're more along the 20% range. You know, obviously, if you're doing a $600,000 to $700,000 project rehab, you know, 15 to 16% makes more sense. But when you're doing a lower end type project, you need to be up, you know, to make it worthwhile, because the time value of money, it needs to be more along the lines of 20, maybe even higher than that. So, you know, just things to keep in mind. I know Bob just came up and said, is there an Excel template to assess a property that takes into consideration of factors? An Excel template to assess a property that takes, we do have, Stacey, I'll let you answer that. Maybe he's looking for one of our calculators that we talk about all these, that we do have these factors, and we do have a calculator that does that.
We have two different calculators.
And we do have it.
I think we got two calculators. We got one that's a little more complex, takes a little bit more time, and then we've got a little short formula calculator that does take into that. I'll just go back and not, you know, to sit there and be going back in history too much, but I was thinking about this as you were talking, and I flipped back to this slide. You know, when we would close around 12 or 15 homes a month. Most of them were production homes, and then we had our custom homes, which would be comparable to something, the small ones like this. Yeah, we were closing 8 to 10 of these a month, making $10,000 to $12,000 a piece, and then we close some other houses, we make 45 to 50. You know, running that kind of volume, you can afford to do this kind of stuff. But if you're a part-time or starting investor and you work 6 months and you pay all your bills and everything like that for $11,000, it's a pretty tough living, or it's at least a pretty tough transition. You know, it's so you got to really look at, you know, how many you're flipping and what you're going to make on it to do that, you know, tying into what you said about, you know, these lower percentages. So with that, I'm going to flip back over to our Q&A and see. Actually, I apologize. I saw, I guess my chat box got stuck and I wasn't seeing the progression. So let's see, title insurance regulated by the, let's see, I had a question about that. And what else? Homestead. Let's see. Is there an Excel template? Yeah, Bob, there's actually, I guess on both, we have, like I said, a more complex and the other. Let's see. Whoa. Now it jumped too fast on me. Okay. Talk about how you go about estimating the rehab cost. You know, we do a couple of different things. I mean, obviously we've got Pat on our team, and we go out there and he actually does a physical on-site assessment to look at it into detail. We also do some things about doing some, you know, quick formulas based on the amount, anywhere from $10 to $30. Depending on what the level of rehab are.
Per square foot.
Yeah, per square foot. You know, on a light rehab, you know, you're going to be in the $7 to $10 range. You start migrating up to the 15, 20, up to a $30, a pretty heavy rehab per square foot. But that's not a science. You know, that's an art on doing that. And I think it's kind of like using our closing cost. You know, we'll use a factor to kind of figure out where we're at in the ballpark, but then we'll start going down and fine tuning it. And that's kind of how on the, you know, the rehab is, you know, when Pat gets out there and starts fine tuning it, you know, does the roof need to be replaced or not? And how much is that going to cost? Does the AC need to be replaced or not? How much is that going to cost? You know, painting. You know, the stuff that came up, we were talking the other day is, you know, you have a 2,400 square foot that's standard ceiling height. That's going to be one factor to paint it. But if you got it with, you know, cathedral ceilings and you got to put scaffolding in there, well, you can't, kind of like the 70% rule. You're going to have to go a little more aggressive on what your number is versus, if it's standard. So, so guys, I think I'm at the bottom of the thing. Yeah, Pat, some points. I think people definitely don't understand. They have a false perception about the hard money lenders and the realtors. We have any more questions out there, guys? Y'all got it all down. Understand it perfectly now. Let's see. We got one coming in. Oh, thank you. So I know it's late at night. I know we have taken every minute of your hour. Oh, you're welcome. I'm going to go for a pause here for a moment. We're going to go to our last slide, obviously, for those who are watching later. We appreciate you guys that are attending live, certainly the ones that are looking at this at a later date. We appreciate you watching as well. As always, you can reach us at either Stacy, Pat, or Kelly at re-titans.com. Leave that up there for a minute, or you can always pause the webinar, and there's our direct phone numbers as well. And we thank you guys for being here. So, and with that ends our webinar.